Abdullabad's deck.
David's list is, I mean, this is extreme even by, say, Tom Ross standards. There's only 12 creatures in this deck.
Oh, really? Okay.
There's 4 Swift Spears, 4 Crowing Crusaders, 4 Satyr Hoplites, 18 lands, and then a lot of spells.
Well, this should be interesting. Here's a Crowing Crusader to start things off. Davis will take a draw. Picks up a copy of Dig Through Time.
Crowd's Favor, Hammerhand, Rouse the Mob, Coordinated Assault, Searing Blood, Dragon's Mantle, Titan Strength, all as 4-ofs. 2 copies of Flamespeaker's Will as well.
This is a very straightforward beatdown approach. That's what's happening here. Here's a Monastery Swift Spear.
David's got quite the draw here.
Yes, he does. This is a Dragon's Mantle. That'll trigger a Crusader. That'll trigger Prowess on the Swift Spear. That'll also make a 1/1 that's going to have haste, too. This is a great start here for David. And Jim's deck is built in such a fashion where, certainly game 1, he is not good against mono red.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a main deck Fated Retribution, for example, which is clearly not where you want to be.
2 Divination, 3 Chase's Ingenuity, 3 Dig Through Times, Fated Retribution, 4 copies of Dissolve. I mean, this is not a list of cards that's very good against a strategy like David's.
Well, there are the beatdowns. Jim with just a Flooded Strand and a passing of the turn. So the Abdullabad off to a beautiful start.
The risk with a strategy like David's is there's only the 12 creatures in the deck, and you're going to draw up any hands that don't have them, or your first play is going to get killed. But in this kind of matchup, that's unlikely to happen, and David has drawn 2 creatures, in fact, so now the rest of his deck is just gas.
Jim going to take a little look-ski-poo. It is a Flamespeaker's Will that has been cast here, and that'll trigger. Now, most of you at home probably don't know what Flamespeaker's Will is, so don't worry, we're getting that queued up for you. As here's another attack from David. Now, enchanted creature you control gets +1/+1. Whenever enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice Flamespeaker's Will. If you do, destroy target artifact. All this is here for. The bonus is nice, +1/+1, but it's another way to target a Crowing Crusader.
Yep. And this really speaks to how low-end David's deck is, because it's not like there's a ton of artifacts floating around in the format.
Yeah.
He's playing this because 1 red, give target creature +1/+1 is good enough for his deck.
Satyr Hoplite post-combat and a passing of the turn. Jim with nothing doing his second turn of the game, nothing like a last breath. But he does have Fated Retribution in hand.
He's only got to hold out for 4 more turns.
Gonna sacrifice 2 Flooded Strands. That'll bring him down to 9. Looks like he's gonna go with Islands Plains here. Yikes.
Pretty rough, you know, on the hunt for open series points. Fly to Houston, you got your buys. And then you just come over here and play against, you know, sock full of batteries, beat down. Your first match on camera.
Banishing Light will take care of the Crowing Crusader.
I don't think there's any rares in David's deck. Hold on. No, that's not true. He's got some fetch lands. He's got 4 Wooded Foothills and 4 Bloodstained Mires for a little bit of thinning.
This is a beatdown. There's no other way to put it. This is a beatdown.
Yep.
Monastery Swift Spear.
Goodness.
This could get filthy.
I mean, there's a Coordinated Assault in David's hand.
Yep.
I haven't done the math, but I assume that's lethal. Yeah, because it's 5 on the table, 2 Prowess triggers, and Coordinated Assault's +2, so that's 9.
I think that David's doing the math right now. I want to make sure that he's getting it right. Jim is hoping clearly that he gets it wrong. Flamespeaker's Will might just be good enough too, because that's going to trigger Prowess twice.
Yeah, this is fine.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of different paths here.
So that's 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think he comes up 1. Nope, that's 9.
Yeah, this is +4 as
Yep.
well. The same way Coordinated Assault's +4.
Absolutely. Everybody in. Jim's going to take up his 4 permanents and get ready for the next game. David. Look at you. You're so happy.
I love This is what's great about Magic. They're not even games you're watching. They're stories. Everything, there's some story unfolding inside the game and then outside the game as well. And, yeah, that was a pretty funny story.
Mono red aggro, up a game here with blue white control. David's going to go to the drawing board very, very quickly. We'll go to his sideboard now. Thankfully for Jim, he does have some really, really nice options here. 3 Burmaz, King of Oreskos, 3 Soulfire Grandmaster, a Faded Retribution, 2 Negates, 3 Glare of Heresy, a Reality Shift, an Erase, and an Hostility. So I imagine the third in Hostilities is coming in, but the 6 creatures are the big ones, Burmaz and Soulfire Grandmaster.
Yeah, Soulfire Grandmaster is, you know, it's just there to block. If he ever gets any sort of spell off of it, I would be stunned, but just something to block and a little bit of lifelink is awesome. I think the 3 copies of Burmaz are the real ace for Jim here. David can't really kill it. He doesn't have Stoke the Flames or anything else similar, so he just has to work around it. And if Jim has an early Burmaz, that might be asking too much of David's deck.
What do we have on David's side?
3 copies of Death Bellow Raider, 2 Peak Eruption, 4 Lightning Strike, 4 Magma Spray, an Act of Treason, and a Harness by Force. I guess I would sideboard nothing. The Death Bellow Raider, I'm assuming, is for Drown in the Sorrow matchups.
You can see. I mean, it's a 2/3.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's just something that survives a -2/-2 effect.
The kind of card that this red deck does not want to play against.
Nope.
At all.
Although, in fairness, I have seen these kind of red decks work around that because if you leave up mana, Monastery Swift Spear can be protected against Drown in Sorrow. You can use your pump effects to move things past 2 toughness. So you definitely don't want to play against the card, but it is not necessarily the end of the world. I've seen this strategy beat these decks before.
Well, players shuffle up here for game number 2. Jim Davis will be on the play. And while we do wait, we will talk about the Star City Games Winter Creature Collection here for 2015. 4 awesome little guys. We're even wearing one of them.
Yeah, we got the mammoth, the little rodent, the wolf, and the Eternal Witness all available on card sleeves, playmats, and dice bags. Over to StarCityGames.com/creature collection to get your items today, or head over to the dealer booth at any Open or Grand Prix Star City Games is at.
David is going old school. You'll see with his sleeves here in just a moment. He's got the vampire.
Okay.
I was going to make a vampire noise, but I don't really know what noise they make. So that's not even what was that?
It's like a Count Dracula sort of. Whatever, man. You do better. I
could do better than that.
I so rarely engage you in things like that. The rare times that I do, you have to be a better source of confidence than what you just were.
That was really good.
Thanks, man.
It was really good. I can't wait for you to do it again sometime.
Yeah.
It was good. It was really good.
I wish you ill.
It's not nice. I'm a nice guy. That's not a really nice thing to say. Jim is going to have to... He's got to interact a little more, I would say, than he did the first game.
He had a Banishing Light. I mean, for his deck on the draw, that's not shabby.
This is not the matchup he wants to play against, that's for sure. Certainly game 1. I think things actually get much better for him after sideboard. Now, we'll see if he can find the land field to cast his spells, because right now, you know, it looks like he has a Burmaz in his hand, but it looks like he only has 1 land. Now, that land is a temple. So perhaps we cross our fingers, try to get a little lucky here.
I think a 1-lander, Jim would not hesitate to set back. I think it is a temple plus a Tranquil Cove or a Radiant Fountain, second to the left.
Sure. Now, if that's the case, I'm probably snap keeping.
Well, you still, I mean, you have to look at the rest of the hand. There's still a Jason's Ingenuity, which is pretty bad. So it's not a guaranteed keep, but I think 2 lands plus Burmaz, Jim has to keep that hand in this matchup.
Abdullabad's going to send it back, did not like his 6 cards. And he mentioned that's something that can happen in this deck, is... You know, he's only got 12 creatures.
Well, he absolutely, positively has to have a creature because the rest of his deck's creature enchantments and lands.
Yep.
And there's only 12. So David has to be pretty aggressive looking for 1 land, 1 creature, and then the rest doesn't even matter.
I'll take a look at 6. Temple of Enlightenment is where Jim will start. He'll take a look at another copy of Temple of Enlightenment. And where he puts this card really tells you about where his hand is at.
So I believe he has another land that comes into play tapped, and then there's the temple on top here. So what this means is he definitely has 3 lands to cast for Maz, but he doesn't get it until turn 4. Is he going to roll the dice here and hope that he finds land number 3 that's untapped that allows him to cast Burmaz on turn 3? Or does he think, my opponent's mulliganed, I'm on the play, at turn 4 Burmaz will be good enough?
He's giving this a long thought here with the temple.
Well, this is, I mean, it's a very conservative play for him to lead this on top. It's him saying, I feel like turn 4 Bramaz is good enough in this matchup. And I suppose with End Hostilities and Chase's Ingenuity in his hand, he just kind of wants lands anyway.
It looks like he's going to keep it on top. After a brief pause in the game, I think we'll be given the green light here yet again.
So I think that on the balance, I like Jim leaving on top here.
I think so. I think it's really close.
Yep.
But I think overall, I do agree with you. There's a Bloodstained Mire down to 19. Mountain, of course, being searched up here by David. And we'll see if he has one of his creatures. Because as you mentioned, he's probably has a mulligan to just one of them.
He has to have something.
There's Sitter Hoplite. Jim will draw. There's the Temple. There is a little scry action. Tranquil Cove.
This is sort of the same sort of awkward position from before, but Jim is still in the market for more mana in a general sense.
A little life gain too.
Yeah.
Can't hurt too much.
I'm sure he would like a land to come in and play untapped here, but it's hard to scry away lands at this point.
It's a Dragon Mantle. Hoplite gets a little bit bigger, thanks to the Heroic Trigger. Here are the beatdowns. Now when you are playing an 18 land deck and not a lot of creatures, these are the kind of draws that can definitely come together. Here's Tranquil Cove from Jim, one of the two that he has in his hand. Now there's Soulfire Grandmaster. That's a nice spell to play in the meantime.
Yeah, no, it's it's unlikely to be able to block specifically against the Hoplite because it's trivial for David to trigger a heroic yet again. But even if David is just on the one creature, it allows Jim to go on the offense and gain a little bit of life.
Here comes Sitter Hoplite. It's a 2/2 right now, but given David's deck, it's so much easier. It's so easy, excuse me, to just make it bigger than that.
Yeah.
So I guess I would be a little surprised if Jim blocked here. But he's going to give it some thought, as Jim is known to do when playing blue-white control. Very methodical in his ways, but it has certainly paid off.
The thing is, I think he may be just trying to get to a spot here where this is the whole turn, and it's one less trick to pump through Bramaz potentially the following turn.
Well, there is the trick. And Jim will draw and play a Tranquil Cove. Picked up a copy of Divination.
And this also might have been the line of play that rationalized the block here of just eating up David's turn and now clearing out the one threat.
Monastery Swiss Baron attack for one. Crowd's favor was the trick that Abdullabad did use. It could be anything. Just something that targeted would have been more than
just
fine.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Just...
And Crowd's favor did a fantastic job of clearing Soulfire Grandmaster out of the way. Here's Divination. So Jim feeling that he doesn't even need to actually cast Bramaz just yet.
Well, his life total is extremely high, and now he's picked up a copy of Elspeth's Champion as well.
Also has Last Breath in his hand for the Swift Spear.
So he can afford to be a little bit more conservative, just hit his land drops, because Elspeth's also going to be game over if that comes up.
There's the attack for one. See if Jim wants to use his Last Breath here. Doesn't seem as though he needs to at this point.
Well, it's pretty easy for David to play over the top of a Last Breath, and I think, David is potentially aware of that trick as well. And so there's just this staring match of Jim's willing to take one, not willing to walk into a trick if he tries to play his Last Breath, and David not willing to just try to do some extra random damage here and run into a trick as well.
Temple of Enlightenment, the draw here for Davis. Take a look at the top card. It's an Elspeth. Going to leave that on top. Jim will just pass the turn back. There's a copy of Magma Spray. But that one doesn't go upstairs.
Yep.
Might be thinking it was Wild Slash, but can't cast the spray. So David will just draw. Looks like Titan Strength is what he's picked up. Here's an attack for 1. There's Titan Strength, and we might see Jim now make a move with his last breath.
This seems like a pretty attractive spot. I mean, it does mean that Jim can't spend this turn casting Jace's Ingenuity instead, so Jim may actually take it, but I think it's fine to just last breath here, untap, play Elspeth, probably lock the game up.
Yeah. That's what it looks like he's going to do. So last breath will take care of the Swift Spear. Titan Strength will be countered upon resolution, so no scry action. Jim just going to turn over the top card of his deck since he already knows that Elspeth is right there. 3 soldier tokens coming.
And he's got another one left in his hand and back up in case something happens to this. But David's deck not really equipped to come back from this sort of spot.
No, an active Elspeth when Jim's at 18? Not quite.
Should be good enough.
Yeah. We'll play out the next handful of turns here, but it would be very unlikely, and I think that even David knows this, as he's going to Magma Spray a token.
Yep.
It is very unlikely for him to get himself out of this situation. There's a Temple. Take a look at Hostilities. That's going to become the bottom card here for Jim. He doesn't need that kind of effect anymore, so there's an attack for 2. Jim going to pick up the pace of play a little bit now. He knows he's in the driver's seat. No reason to even play Bramaz here.
Yeah, rather just Jace's Ingenuity. Keep the information concealed. David's probably going to be giving this up pretty soon anyway.
Yeah, these sort of exchanges aren't game-winning ones. Magma Spray is going after tokens. There is Jace's Ingenuity. So 3 cards coming for Davis. Dissolve among the options. Another Bramaz draw and Tranquil Cove will come in. Davis up to 19. An attack for 5. More soldiers coming. The ultimate from Elspeth on the way here in just a moment, most likely. Let's see if Jim wants to even cast Bramaz. I actually like not casting Bramaz.
Yeah, no reason to.
No reason to give away the info.
Yep.
So I actually like that a lot. And that's going to do it. Jim Davis is going to win game number 2 here against David Abdullabad. Blue-white control and mono-red aggro will head to game number 3. David's start was fantastic in game 1. Pretty bad in game 2. But fortunately for him, he's on the play game 3.
And I'm curious now, David showed a lot of copies of Magma Spray, oddly enough. It wouldn't surprise me if Jim went into his deck right now and cut the Soulfire Grandmasters, because David's actually set up to answer that card. I don't know if he has enough efficient stuff to bring in its replacement. Maybe the difference, if he's cutting Soulfire Grandmaster, it means something like Fated Retribution or Negate has to come into the deck. Maybe that's too bad, but David had so many shock effects there that I almost feel like Soulfire Grandmaster should be coming out of Jim's deck for game 3, especially with him on the draw.
For me, I think I would want to leave in Grandmaster, and for me, it's a situation I just want to make him have Magma Spray. I don't think the Soulfire Grandmaster is like a brick wall in this match or anything. I think it's fine. I just think it's something where he doesn't have a better option.
It's hard to. I would have to really sit down and sketch out what his list looks like in the event that card gets removed, but it doesn't block very effectively against David's deck because he has so many combat tricks, so much prowess, so much heroic and so forth. And I think that the Magma Sprays is kind of the icing on the cake. We'll see what Jim wants to do here, but I think he assumed that card would be very good in game 2. And given the way that David's deck is set up, it's no longer clear that's the case.
Well, game number 3 going to be underway here between David and Jim in just a moment. While we do wait, we will briefly discuss Cardboard Crack. So popular, there's 4 books now.
Yeah, we launched with 3, and the reception was so good that we've launched a 4th. All the paperback books are available. There's 4 different copies. They're all available for $12.99 a piece. StarCityGames.com/cardboardcrack to order your copies today.
Important for Jim to get up to a good start here. I mean, 2 buys, of course, is fantastic, but you always want to get your tournament started off with a win. I think he's in a pretty tough matchup. I think game 1 is basically unwinnable if David has any sort of a draw. Doesn't even have to be a great draw, just a good draw.
Exactly. The real pressure is just what is, does David's opening hand yield a creature? Again, there's only 12 and there's only 18 lands, and that's where things have to begin for him to do anything. Once you get past that point, the rest of his deck is so redundant that it doesn't really matter what everything else looks like.
I do expect Jim to win his sideboarded games when he's on the play a decent amount of the time. I don't want to say he's like a huge favorite, but I think that the sideboarded games when Jim is on the play are favorable for him because he's lowering his curve. He's interacting more often. David's deck isn't great against interaction. I think Jim has some real haymakers that David has some trouble against. But when he's on the draw, things are a little more scary.
And a deck like David's can definitely push through even something like Bramaz when David's on the play. We saw turn 3 there. Jim had access to Banishing Light in game 1, which he lost. That Banishing Light, if that was Bramaz, it would have effectively done the same thing. It would have answered one threat that turn, and David had access to a turn 4 kill.
Yeah.
So, and that's setting aside even things like the 4 copies of Hammerhand that are in David's list that make Bramaz even more prohibitive. So Jim, even though that was a really dominating game number 2, can't feel that confident about the matchup here because even his good sideboarded draws may not be good enough on the draw.
No, it is game number 3 here between Blue Eye Control and Mono Red Aggro. See how things do break here. Again, Davis, number 1 on our Open Series leaderboard here for Season 1, in great position to win the Points Championship, to qualify himself for the Players Championship. But he's going to all the tournaments outside of Los Angeles next weekend to make sure that he doesn't slip up and lose this thing.
Yeah, he's got a cushion, but that cushion can evaporate very quickly.
Looks like David's going to keep his opener. Jim's going to take a look at his. Doesn't look great, and he's going to send it back.
5 lands, Banishing Light, Elspeth. And with David keeping 7, that's not going to be good enough. We know from game 1, David's deck fully capable of killing on the 4th turn, even through a removal spell on turn 3. Jim needs to find things like Last Breath, Soulfire Grandmaster, Bramaz. But that opening hand is not going to cut it.
So down to 6 he's going to go. Blue Eye Control here for Jim yet again. I think this particular weekend will be very informative about where this deck is at and how Jim feels about it.
Exactly. I think that is always rocky week 1 with control lists, especially one like Blue Eye Control. When you're black, you have access to things like Thoughtseized Heroes Downfall, which are better and worse against certain things, but at least they answer everything. Jim is playing with cards like Nullify, Last Breath. There's less certainty that these are going to line up the right way.
Yeah, if you're in the wrong matchups with those cards, your deck doesn't even really function.
Right.
Though if you're right, your deck is very good. Six cards here for Davis. Jace's Ingenuity among them. It looks like the card that interacts the earliest is Bramaz.
Yep.
He's going to be leaning on that one pretty heavily. Bloodstained Mire getting sacrificed here for David very quickly. He's down to 19.
Looks like a 2-lander with Bramaz, some expensive stuff.
Yeah, there's a Dig Through Time hanging out there too.
And this is a consequence of Jim trying to fight the big decks of the format. He just doesn't have a lot of sideboard room to cut all of his bad stuff in this kind of matchup. This is particularly extreme, but he does have to leave in things like Dig Through Time, Jace's Ingenuity, cards that are hard to be good in games where Jim is losing.
There's Hater Hoplite. David will pass the turn. We're heading Jim's way. Jim will take a draw step. Soulfire Grandmaster is not a bad first draw.
And there's line number 3 for Bramaz, too.
Sometimes the top of the deck just gives you what you need. There's a mountain for David. Dragon Mantle. Trigger Heroic. Draw the card. Coming into the red zone. And a pump.
This is a spot where if David had another thing to target with, I think I would have preferred him doing that to get this permanently out of Last Breath range.
I can see that.
Just fire something else out on there. You get to deal some more damage that turn, which could be nice. And it makes sure your creature is immune to Last Breath. It doesn't appear that Jim has it, because I think he would immediately cast it if Last Breath was available.
I think it would too. Instead, he just got a Soulfire Grandmaster and a passing of the turn. Now, what will be interesting here is to see how Jim decides to use Soulfire Grandmaster. Last time, he thought a long time about blocking. This time, he won't even get the opportunity, thanks to Magma Spray, a concern that you brought up during sideboarding.
Yeah, that was my big concern with leaving in the Grandmaster here.
Jim forcing David to have the answer. He did. Now he's going to come into the red zone here with Seder Hoplite. Jim, all he can do is shrug his shoulders and says, how much? There's Coordinated Assault. Jim going to take a look. He wants to see, does that have to have 2 targets? And there's the pump. Now it is out of Last Breath range.
Yep.
But there's a trade-off there. That's one less Coordinated Assault that he will have against a card like Burmaz.
Yeah, that's that turn's totally fine though. He does get his creature permanently out of Last Breath range.
Radiant Fountain, pretty nice draw.
David's drawing a lot of lands this game. I think he has 1 more land in hand. You might be saying his 4 lands really a lot. Well, for a deck with 18 lands, that's a huge portion.
For what this deck's trying to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jim up to 14. Here's Burmaz. And the lands in these decks for Jim, they play such a huge role against the aggressive strategies.
Yeah, you can go back and watch his match of the Invitational against Mono Red, and it was the same deal.
Yeah.
I think he won one of the games at 7, having gained 8 life off his land, something like that.
And is Jim willing to snap block here? Coordinated assault, excuse me, certainly a concern.
I mean, Jim does have the option of just saying, no blocks, untap, attack you with Burmaz, and use the tokens to block. The problem right now is the rest of Jim's hand is so bad, it's just Divination, Jace's Ingenuity, Dig Through Time. If he loses this Burmaz, the game might just end.
Yeah.
The upshot, though, the other side is this is a lot of damage to take.
It's not pretty. There's crowd's favor. And it looks like Jim is just basically saying, yeah, I'll take as much as you can deal me. And I'm really hoping that you don't have a lot of burn in your deck. I think that's what he's basically saying. You know, a card like Stoke the Flames, is that a card that you can really afford to play? Do you have a lot of reach in your deck to be able to kill me? So a healthy amount of damage will come across. Davis is going to go down to 8. Jim will take a draw. It's an island. This is going to be a divination.
I think Jim is really on the hunt for Tranquil Cove or Radiant Fountain here.
Banishing Light, Nullify. Those aren't bad. This is a temple. Take a look at the top card. Don't have a great look at what Jim's deciding about.
Keep in mind now the Burmaz is basically on chump blocking duty. There's also the question, you know, if you're on Jim's side of the table, why didn't he just pump 2 more times with the Dragon's Mantle? What is left over in his hand right now?
Now we know the answer.
Yeah.
It's a copy of Searing Blood. Burmaz is going to come in the red zone along with its cat friend. Searing Blood is going to take care of the token, which means Jim's going to have to take some damage here.
And this is so bad for Jim. The upshot is that Jim has access to Banishing Light in hand, and David's out of resources. So if he can survive, he's in really good shape. But a Hammer Hand here, some sort of other can't block effect. If he brought in his Achatreason or Harnessed by Force, Jim could die with 5 very powerful cards left over in his hand.
You had better believe if Jim gets the opportunity to block, he will. I think Titan Strength was the draw. As Davis is down to 5.
He has to block. It's lethal.
Yep. Can't block fast enough.
But Jim knows if he gets to next turn and David doesn't have another creature, the Banishing Light could be good enough to take the game over.
Yep. There's Coordinated Assault. First strike, heroic triggers, all that jazz. That lets David win in combat. So there goes Jim's creatures. But as you mentioned, Banishing Light is the big one here. Dig Through Time to draw. There is Banishing Light. So that annoying Seder Hoplite is finally gone.
Now David desperately needs to draw a creature here.
This is the window. Drew a copy of Dragon's Mantle. And while Dragon Mantle and Titan Strength are very good cards in his deck, it's a creature that he needs right now.
And now Jim with Nullify here, and I think that might do it. Now Jim may be loath to cast the Soulfire Grandmaster because he's seen Mammoth Spray, he's seen Searing Blood.
Yep.
Maybe he just wants to sit back here and cast Jace's Ingenuity.
And when we watch Jim play with Blue Eye Control, he very often takes a very conservative approach. So I think it would be uncharacteristic for him to play a card like Soulfire Grandmaster this turn and cross his fingers and say, I hope this works.
It doesn't line up with the way that Jim typically plays.
And he's not playing, and he's just going to pass the turn. David draws a Bloodstained Mire, deploys that. All you can do is pass, and this gives Jim the opportunity to draw 3 cards, hoping he does not have to face burn spells, and he does not. So 3 cards coming here for Davis. Last Breath, Radiant Fountain, and a Banishing Light. Radiant Fountain is a big one.
And now he can start chaining together his card drawers. He's going to gain some life along the way. And I don't think David's deck allows him to catch up from this spot.
Tranquil Cove as well. And you know, in this deck, those lands that gain life, they may not seem like a big deal, but you take a look at Davis's deck, it was 4 Radiant Fountains, 4 Tranquil Coves. They matter.
Could have easily died this game.
Yeah. Now it looks like Jim's going to go with the Grandmaster. He feels comfortable enough with himself at 7 to put it into play.
He also has the option of last breathing his own Soulfire Grandmaster in response to a searing effect if that comes up.
And still being able to cast Nullify.
Yeah. So this is a pretty safe spot. And once Jim starts connecting with this, then David's certainly not catching up.
Yeah. Interesting. Soulfire Grandmaster, you know, when that card was revealed. A lot of thoughts about it just going directly into Jeskai tokens and, you know, where will its home be? I don't think Blue Eye Control was a place that people were expecting it to go.
No, not at all. I mean, I didn't at least. And Jim has probably, I've seen him have more success with this card in blue-white than I've seen this card be productive in the Jeskai builds.
Yeah. The draw was a mountain there for David. So we go back Jim's way, and hostility is the draw. Here's an attack for 2. It will connect, and that's big for Davis.
I think that Jim has a good enough sense of what's going on with David's deck at this point that he knows in spots like this, David's hands just lands and pump spells.
Davis up to 10. Got to be feeling pretty comfy now. The draws that mono red aggro, especially this build, are capable of. They're very explosive, as we saw in game 1.
Yeah, I mean, Jim had Banishing Light into end hostilities against even the aggressive decks of the format. That's going to be enough time. And against David's deck, that wasn't even close to the case. But these post-board games where Jim has access to more interaction, he can weather the early storm, and then we get into spots like this where David just doesn't have a lot of relevant cards left in his deck.
Yeah, it almost plays like a combo deck if you think about it. 12 creatures and then just a lot of auras and enchantments and Titan strengths. It feels almost like a hexproof strategy, really.
Yeah.
There's Deathbellow Raider. Jim gonna take a look at that one. Come on now, Jim, that's Theros All-Star.
I spent many an evening with that guy, and often 2 or 3 of his buddies.
The Minotaur Berserker, was it going into the graveyard or was it getting work done for you?
Both.
A little of this, a little of that.
Yeah, sometimes it was sweet, sometimes it wasn't. But it did save me a click, which is very valuable for my Magic Online experience.
That is really nice, actually.
It just has to attack.
Yeah,
just takes care of itself.
That's really why I like Valley Dasher.
Yeah, same deal.
Just making my life easier.
Listen, I'm very sensitive to the number of clicks I have to generate in a game now, you know?
Well, in life, you only get so many clicks.
Exactly.
Might as well save me one.
That is true. Now, Jim's in this position of, you know, I don't know if my opponent really brings cards that are better than this to the table. So do I use a counterspell even on this card that is seemingly irrelevant because the rest of David's hands probably, you know, just creature enchantments and things to pump this thing.
Mm-hmm. And Jim asking the judge a question very quickly here. I imagine about Deathbellow Raider and how this works. What the heck is this doing in my opponent's deck?
Well, I think that, yeah, it may be something related to Dragon's Mantle and who controls, but
Either way, it'll be cleared up here in just a moment as we do have a judge taking a look at some cards and answering some questions for Jim. I think slowly but surely as we make our way through these events on the Open Series, Mono Red is going to do something important.
Well, I think that there's a lot of powerful cards available to the strategy. The question is, do you want to be playing, 20 to 22 lands and kind of play like a normal curve of creatures and go up to things, maybe even all the way up to things like Stormbreath Dragon and Sarkhan, at least Chandra, maybe Outpost Siege now. That's one way to build the deck. And then there's the other way to build the deck, which is what David's doing here, which is even more extreme than the Tom Ross school, which is just all one-mana creatures, all pump spells, try to run you out before you get anything going. The upshot of David's deck is it's incredibly explosive. You can kill on turn 4, I'm sure, pretty regularly in games where the opponent isn't interacting on the first or second turn. The downside is, how often does David's deck fold to just one piece of removal? That's probably a reasonable percentage of the time, just the nature of the deck. The mono red, the more classic school of it, you get a little bit more stability, you get kind of a normal curve, you get a little bit more power, but you are allowing decks to go to turn 4, turn 5, turn 6 against you, even in games where you're winning. And a lot of the decks with Siege Rhinos and Waymate Rocks and such can do some really powerful things.
Well, the question has been answered. So play will resume. Deathbellow Raider, I predict, is on the stack. Now here we have a dig through time for Davis. And he's finally had enough time to actually cast that card, because dig through time, obviously, an incredibly powerful card in this deck. But do you have the time to cast against a mono red deck? Generally, no.
I think that David's deck is so extreme that almost all the cards in Jim's deck, they're almost irrelevant. By which I mean dig through time, Jason's Ingenuity. He's casting those in spots where he's already winning. The real test is, can you Last Breath on turn 2? Do you have a Bramaz or a Banishing Light on turn 3? Do you have access to End Hostilities on turn 5? The number of times that Jim is able to answer yes, he's a huge favorite. And when he answers no, then his percentage points goes down. Getting to spots like this where dig through time resolves, normally, yes, dig through time is a powerful thing. Jim is going to go on to win this game, but that's not what's going on here. It's just, can he pass the initial tests that David is trying to put him under? Jim was able to do that in the post-board games. And now the rest of it is just wrap up.
And that's what he's trying to do right now. Banishing Light's going to help him do just that. That's going after Deathbellow Raider, things I thought I would say this weekend. That should be a hashtag.
Yeah. Although David's deck does actually seem like a Valley Dasher deck. I think the reason that the Minotaur is in here, my guess is it's in the sideboard and it's for Drown in Sorrow.
3 toughness.
To have something he can play that doesn't just die. But decks have played Valley Dasher before, and David's deck does fit the bill of, not too picky about card quality. the real test of whether or not you are a Valley Dasher deck.
Here's Bramaz. I'm passing of the turn for Jim. Dude, I'll dash the Valley all night long.
I know.
I don't care. Tried to yesterday, night before bed. And that 8-4.
Valley Dasher did some great work.
We dealt like 8 points of damage with that thing.
Yeah.
That's so much. David will just pass after that Dragon's Mantle. Got the draws card, but didn't find what he was looking for. Davis will take a draw step.
So Jim's side of the board right now is comical. If we could just get the screenshot here of just Jim's side. All blue and white lands and some colorless lands. 2 white creatures enchanted by Dragon's Mantles and a Banishing Light on a Deathbellow Minotaur.
Nice.
Nice board.
Nice. Just how we drew it up.
Exactly.
And David has 5 mountains. Take a draw step. It's a Searing Blood.
And Jim has protection from that with both Last Breath and an incredibly high life total.
Yep. The thing about this particular build of Mono Red, and it depends on the format and the texture and all that stuff and what you're playing against, but this one can't really claw back.
No, it's when the door closes, it's not opening back up.
There are some versions that can, that have had Demigod of Revenge and Stormbreath Dragon and able to go a little bit bigger, but this very low to the ground version from David is not. It has too many dead draws, and that's what we saw happen here. Jim Davis going to win this match with blue-white control over Mono Red Aggro 2-1, and for number 1 on our Season 1 leaderboard here to kick off 2015, off to a great start.